Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. I'll never forget the day my husband's boss called me aside. The moment was so sudden, so unexpected, that it felt like the walls around me shifted. His voice was calm, steady, but there was something hidden beneath his words, a weight, a secret, a truth I wasn't ready to hear. And in that instant, I realized that life was about to unravel in ways I could never have imagined. This story begins quietly, like many others. A woman married young, hopeful for stability, stepping into a household that promised comfort. My husband worked hard, always at the mercy of his boss, a man of influence who seemed to carry history in his very posture. His name was Charles Wainwright, a name whispered with a mix of respect and unease in our small town. He wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a keeper of stories too dark for the daylight. At first, I thought his attention toward me was nothing more than politeness. A glance, a question, the way he remembered little details I'd mentioned in passing. But over time, I noticed that his interest carried weight, as if he saw through me, into me, past the surface of who I was. It unsettled me, yet it intrigued me. Because Charles Wainwright was not like the others. He had power, he had secrets, and he had a way of drawing people into his orbit without them realizing it until they were already too close. The Wainwright family was always surrounded by whispers. Some said the daughters were beautiful beyond words. Others claimed they lived sheltered lives, locked away from society except for rare appearances. Their father, a man both admired and feared, raised them with an intensity that bordered on possession. People speculated about the household, but no one dared to speak too loudly. Because when it came to the Wainwrights, curiosity could be dangerous. But I never thought those old stories would find their way into my own life. Until the day Charles leaned close and told me something I could barely process. His eyes were unwavering, his words deliberate. What he revealed wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about my husband. It was about the sisters, the Wainwright heiresses, and the scandal that had been buried under silence for years. And in that moment, standing in the quiet corner of his grand office, I felt my pulse race. My mind scrambled to connect the dots. Were the rumors true? Could it be possible that behind the heavy curtains of that mansion, something unthinkable had happened? Charles didn't speak like a man confessing. He spoke like someone passing down a legacy, a story that had been waiting for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to hear it. And somehow, that someone was me. I remember how the air in the room felt charged, as if time had slowed down. I kept glancing toward the door, wondering if someone might overhear, if someone might step in and end the moment before it went any further. But no one came. It was just him and me. And the words he left hanging in the air were like a storm cloud forming over everything I thought I knew about loyalty, about family, about love. Was I supposed to tell my husband? Was I supposed to walk away and pretend I'd heard nothing? Or was this the kind of truth that once revealed, refused to stay buried? The Wainwright heiresses weren't just women in the shadows anymore. They were at the center of a story that could shatter reputations, destroy marriages, and reveal the hidden heart of a man who had controlled everyone around him. And now, I was holding that story like a fragile glass in my hands, unsure if I should set it down gently or let it fall and watch it break. And here's the part that keeps me awake at night. Charles didn't tell me everything. He stopped, mid-sentence, leaving me with more questions than answers. He looked at me as though he was testing me, as though my reaction mattered more than the truth itself. So I ask you, what would you have done? If you were standing in my shoes, with your husband just down the hall, would you have pressed for more? Or would you have turned away, afraid of what might come next? Let me know in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts, your theories. Because trust me, this is only the beginning. The story of the Wainwright sisters is far from over, and what comes next will leave you questioning everything you thought you understood about family, power, and love. Stay with me, because the next part will take you deeper into their world, a world where secrets can destroy and forbidden desires refuse to stay hidden. The rest of that day, I couldn't shake off the weight of what Charles had said. His words stayed with me like an echo, something I kept turning over in my mind, trying to understand. My husband was cheerful when he came home that evening, speaking about work, about the promotions his company was preparing for, about how much respect he wanted to earn from his boss. And there I was, sitting across the table, nodding at him while hiding the storm of thoughts I carried. I kept asking myself, should I tell him? Should I protect him from the truth? Or would telling him only crush everything he was building? The Wainwright mansion had always felt like a place of mystery. Tall iron gates stood at the entrance, and behind them stretched acres of land that people rarely entered. The sisters were sometimes seen walking the garden, their dresses flowing in the breeze, but never for long. They would disappear as quickly as they appeared, as if they belonged to another time. It gave them an almost ghostly reputation, though anyone who had seen them up close described them as strikingly alive, their presence impossible to ignore. Charles often spoke of his family with restraint. He rarely smiled when their names came up, and his tone always carried a shadow. That day in his office, when he leaned closer to me and whispered pieces of the family's history, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a strange mix of pride and pain. It made me wonder if the burden of those secrets had been carved into him for years, shaping the way he looked at everyone around him. As the weeks went by, his attention toward me grew more deliberate. He would find moments when my husband wasn't around, offering to pour me a glass of wine during company gatherings, or walking me through the corridors of his mansion while my husband spoke with others in the study. At first, I told myself it was harmless, that he was simply a man who enjoyed conversation. But deep down, I knew there was something more. The way he looked at me wasn't casual. It was searching, intent, as though he was measuring whether I was capable of carrying the truth he wanted to share. One evening, after a dinner hosted at the mansion, he asked if I'd like to see the library. The moment felt innocent enough, but when I followed him down the hallway lined with oil paintings and velvet curtains, my heart was beating so fast I thought he might hear it. The library was unlike anything I'd seen before. Shelves stretching up to the ceiling, filled with books bound in leather and dusted with history. The scent of old paper and polished wood filled the air. "This is where the family kept their records," he said softly, running his fingers along the spines of the books. "Every letter, every journal, every secret is hidden here. Most people think history is written for the world. But in this house, it was written to be locked away." I didn't know what to say. My hands brushed against the edges of the desk as I tried to steady myself. His presence felt overwhelming in the quiet of that room, the glow of the fireplace flickering across his face. There was something in the air, an unspoken pull, a tension that neither of us acknowledged out loud, but both of us felt. Then he turned to me, his gaze steady. "You remind me of her," he said. "Who?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "One of the sisters," he replied. "The one who wanted to leave. The one who believed love could save her from this house." I wanted to press him, to ask more, but just like before, he stopped. His silence was heavy, almost purposeful, as if he wanted me to draw my own conclusions. And perhaps that was his way of pulling me closer, leaving the story half-told so that I would need to return for the rest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake beside my husband, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, while my mind wandered back to the library, to the way Charles's voice had softened, to the way his eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. It felt dangerous, yet it was impossible to ignore. I kept wondering, why me? Why had he chosen to confide in me of all people? Was it because he trusted me? Or was it because he knew the effect his words were having? Either way, the more he shared, the deeper I found myself pulled into the world of the Wainwright heiresses. And I couldn't tell where curiosity ended and something else began. What I did know was this: the story wasn't finished. Not his, not mine, and certainly not theirs. And I couldn't help but wonder what would happen when the rest of the truth finally came out. The following days were a delicate dance of appearances and hidden truths. At home, my husband spoke of promotions, contracts, and the future, oblivious to the whirlwind that had begun to stir around me. Meanwhile, Charles's presence lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every time we met in passing, at work events, in quiet hallways, or during company dinners, I felt that same tension, the silent pull that made ordinary conversations feel loaded with meaning. It was dangerous, intoxicating, and I couldn't decide which emotion scared me more. I started noticing small details about him that I had overlooked before. The way his hand would rest on the edge of a table just a fraction too long. The faint crease in his forehead when he considered his words. The way his voice softened when no one else was around. I wanted to tell myself these were just coincidences, the result of imagination, but deep down, I knew otherwise. And yet, part of me couldn't help but feel drawn to the intensity, the aura of someone carrying secrets that demanded to be uncovered. As I tried to reconcile my feelings, I also learned more about the sisters. Rumors had long surrounded their lives. Some whispered about forbidden affairs, others about a controlling father who kept them under lock and key. But through the glimpses Charles gave me, I began to see them as more than rumors. They were young women trapped by circumstance, seeking love, freedom, and understanding. And somehow, their struggle mirrored my own. Not in exact detail, of course, but in the way I felt drawn to a truth that could change everything around me. At the office, I began to notice subtle dynamics between my husband and Charles. My husband's respect for him was genuine, bordering on reverence, but I caught moments of unease too. A flicker in his eyes, a pause in his voice when Charles praised him, almost as if he suspected that beneath the politeness lay something unspoken. It made me question everything. Was my husband naive, or was he simply unwilling to see what was right in front of him? Then there was a letter I found accidentally, slipped under the office door one afternoon. It was addressed to Charles, written in delicate handwriting. The words were vague yet pointed, hinting at meetings, confessions, and warnings. I could feel the story of the sisters being rewritten in my hands, each sentence dripping with tension and secrecy. Reading it, I couldn't help but wonder, was this correspondence meant for me to find, or had fate simply guided it into my possession? One evening, I lingered at the office after hours, pretending to organize files. When Charles arrived unexpectedly, he didn't seem surprised to see me. Instead, he studied my expression, his eyes searching for something he couldn't quite name. For a brief moment, the air between us seemed to shift, charged, almost electric. I wanted to ask questions, to press for more, but the words caught in my throat. He merely said, "Some truths are revealed slowly. Are you ready for what comes next?" I wanted to answer, to claim that I was ready, but I wasn't. And perhaps I never would be, not entirely. There was a thrill in not knowing, in standing on the edge of something monumental, yet terrifying. The romantic tension was undeniable, but the stakes were higher than anything I had imagined. One wrong move, and everything could shatter, not just my own life, but the lives of those around me. As I walked home that night, I couldn't help but think about the choices ahead. What would I do if the full truth came to light? Could I trust my own instincts, or would the weight of family secrets, ambition, and hidden desires cloud my judgment? And what about Charles? Was he a guide, a danger, or something in between? I'd like to hear what you think. Would you confront the secrets if you were in my shoes, or let them unfold slowly? Comment below and share your thoughts. Predict what might happen next. Will I finally learn the sisters' hidden story, or will the truth remain buried, just out of reach? Days turned into a blur of unspoken words and fleeting glances. Every encounter with Charles felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, where the slightest misstep could send everything tumbling down. I found myself lingering in his office longer than necessary, pretending to review files, while secretly listening to the subtle changes in his tone, the pauses that seemed to say more than his words ever could. One evening, the office was empty except for us. A storm raged outside, rain thrashing against the windows, turning the city lights into blurred streaks. The electricity in the air was palpable, a tension that wrapped around us and refused to loosen. Charles stood close enough that I could feel the faint heat of his presence, yet far enough to remind me that there were boundaries I shouldn't cross. But the pull was undeniable, a magnetic force that drew me closer to secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the hardest truths are the ones that stare back at you from your own reflection. And the hardest choices are the ones you never want to make." I didn't answer. My pulse was racing, and I could feel my hands trembling slightly. He stepped closer, and for a moment, the world outside the office, the rain, the lights, my husband, ceased to exist. The tension between us wasn't just about secrets. It was about desire, curiosity, and the dangerous thrill of the unknown. Then came the whispers, small hints of scandal and rumors circulating in the office, almost like a shadow chasing us. People spoke of the Wainwright heiresses in hushed tones, their lives dissected into fragments of gossip. But what intrigued me most were the details Charles would hint at, never fully revealing, like a puzzle with missing pieces. The sisters had ambitions, fears, and secrets that could ruin everything. And somehow, I was caught in the middle, a witness to truths that weren't meant to be mine. I started seeing the parallels between their lives and mine, how ambition, loyalty, and desire could intertwine in dangerous ways. My husband, kind and unsuspecting, trusted Charles implicitly, and I trusted Charles too, though with caution. There were moments when I wanted to tell my husband everything, to unburden myself, but the thought of exposing the secrets before I understood them fully felt reckless. I was balancing on a knife's edge, and I could feel it. One night, I received a message, an invitation from Charles to meet at a small, private cafe downtown. He claimed it was urgent, something he couldn't discuss at the office. My mind raced. What could be so important that it couldn't wait? Was it a revelation about the sisters? Or about me? I debated calling my husband, but the curiosity, the tension, the magnetic pull that I couldn't ignore drove me to go. When I arrived, the cafe was nearly empty, save for a few late-night patrons and the low hum of jazz in the background. Charles was already there, seated in a corner with the warm glow of a lamp above him. His eyes met mine immediately, and for a second, the world narrowed down to just the two of us. He gestured for me to sit, his smile faint but knowing. "You've come," he said simply, and the weight of those words sent shivers down my spine. "Of course," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He slid a small envelope across the table. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photographs, snapshots of the Wainwright mansion, the sisters, and cryptic notes scrawled in a familiar handwriting. Each image seemed to tell a story, and each note hinted at secrets so dangerous that my stomach tightened with fear and anticipation. It was a story of power, forbidden trust, and desires that defied everything conventional. As I stared at the photos, my mind raced with possibilities. Who had taken these? Why now? And why was Charles showing them to me? The questions tangled in my mind, creating a web I couldn't escape. Every glance at him felt like a test. Was he challenging me, warning me, or drawing me closer? The cafe's clock ticked relentlessly, each second amplifying the tension. I realized that I was no longer just an observer. I was part of a story that had been unfolding for decades, a story of ambition, betrayal, and unspoken longing. And as much as I wanted clarity, the uncertainty was intoxicating, like standing on the edge of a storm that could either consume or transform everything I knew. Just as I was about to ask him the questions burning in my mind, Charles leaned back slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Not everything can be revealed at once," he said. "Some truths demand patience, and some are meant to test how far you're willing to go." I felt my pulse quicken. The tension was unbearable, yet I couldn't look away. The rain outside had slowed, but the storm inside me, the storm of desire, fear, and anticipation, had only grown stronger. And as I left the cafe that night, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand, I realized that the most intense moments were still ahead. Every choice, every glance, every secret would push me closer to a revelation that could change everything. What would you do in my place? Would you risk everything to uncover the truth, or step back and let the story unfold slowly? Comment below with your thoughts and share your predictions. Who do you trust, and who might be hiding the real secret? The days after the cafe meeting were a haze of questions and half-truths. Every interaction with Charles felt like navigating a minefield. One misstep could ignite a revelation that might change everything. I tried to return to my routine, to pretend life was ordinary, but the envelope of photographs remained in my bag, a constant reminder of the secrets I had glimpsed. I hadn't told my husband. How could I, when even I didn't fully understand what I held? Then, the twist came unexpectedly. One morning, as I was leaving the office, I received a text message from an unknown number. It simply read, "You're closer than you realize. Watch your back tonight." My stomach dropped, and a chill ran down my spine. At first, I thought it was a prank, someone playing with the office gossip, but the timing, the phrasing, it felt deliberate. Someone was watching. Someone knew I had the envelope. Someone knew I had stepped too close to the Wainwright secrets. That evening, I found myself walking home with a heightened sense of caution. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than usual, every passerby a potential observer. When I reached my front door, a folded note had been slipped under it. My hands shook as I picked it up, the handwriting familiar, It was Charles's. But the message inside wasn't comforting. Meet me at the estate. Alone. Midnight. There's something you need to see. Something that changes everything. My heart pounded. The request was reckless, dangerous, but the pull, magnetic, irresistible, was impossible to resist. I knew my husband would never forgive me if he found out, but I couldn't ignore the urgency in the message. And somewhere deep inside, I wanted to know more, to uncover the hidden layers of the Wainwright story that had been teasing me for weeks. When I arrived at the estate, the gates creaked open under the weight of the night, and the mansion loomed larger than ever, cloaked in shadows. The storm from days ago had left the ground slick with rain, and the distant echo of thunder punctuated the silence. Charles was waiting in the grand hall, his figure half hidden by the flickering light of a single chandelier. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he handed me another envelope, thicker than the last, sealed with a wax emblem I recognized from the Wainwright crest. Inside were letters, old correspondence, photographs, and journal pages. But this time, there was a revelation that made my breath catch. One of the sisters, the youngest, had secretly confided in someone outside the family, a confidant whose identity had remained hidden for decades. That person, it turned out, had documented every interaction, every betrayal, every secret of the Wainwright household. And now, I held the proof. The weight of it pressed down on me. This was no longer just a story of ambition or forbidden desire. This was a story with consequences, one that could destroy reputations and alter lives irrevocably. And in that moment, the romantic tension between Charles and me, already electric, took on a new layer. He was no longer just a guide to the past. He was a gatekeeper to a future I could barely imagine, someone whose trust one needed, but whose motives I wasn't sure I could fully decipher. As he stepped closer, the dim light casting shadows across his face, I realized that the line between curiosity and danger had blurred. "This changes everything," he whispered, his voice low and deliberate. "But it also means you have to decide. Are you willing to step fully into the story, even if it means risking everything you love?" I didn't answer immediately. My mind raced through possibilities, weighing loyalty, love, and the magnetic pull of the secrets I had uncovered. My pulse quickened as I considered what might happen if someone else discovered the letters, or if my husband found out before I was ready. And then I looked at Charles, at the intensity in his eyes, and I felt the unspoken question. Could I trust him? The estate seemed to hold its breath around us, the air thick with anticipation. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of curtains, every flicker of candlelight felt like a signal that the climax of this story was approaching, but not yet revealed. The tension was unbearable, yet I couldn't step back. The pull of desire, curiosity, and fear was too strong, binding me to the unfolding drama of the Wainwright family. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you uncover every secret, no matter the cost, or walk away before the truth consumes everything? Comment your predictions and thoughts below. Who do you trust in this story, and who might be hiding the most dangerous secret? That night, the mansion felt alive, almost breathing, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Charles led me through the corridors, the thick carpet muffling our steps, until we reached the study, the room where the Wainwright secrets had been meticulously documented. He handed me the letters and photographs once more, and I realized then that I wasn't just holding evidence. I was holding the power to change the narrative entirely. My father, he was not the man anyone thought he was, Charles began, his voice tight with emotion. And the sisters, they were never simply victims of circumstance. They were clever, resilient, and they used the only tools they had to survive. You need to understand that before you decide what to do next. I sifted through the papers, my eyes widening as the layers of betrayal, ambition, and love revealed themselves. There were entries detailing secret alliances, letters hinting at forbidden desires, and a journal where the youngest sister spoke candidly about escaping the control of her father while protecting her sisters from ruin. Each piece of the puzzle added clarity and horror in equal measure. Then I saw it, a letter addressed to me, dated years ago, as if someone had known all along that I would become part of this story. It spoke of trust, of choices, and of a warning. The one who uncovers the truth will find themselves tested in ways they cannot predict. But the heart must guide the mind, or everything will collapse. My pulse raced. This was no ordinary revelation. I wasn't just witnessing history. I was living it. Charles stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine as he handed me a photograph of the sisters. They trusted me to protect their story, he said quietly. And now, you have to decide. Do you step forward, reveal the truth, or let it remain buried to protect those you love? The weight of the decision pressed on me like a physical force. I thought of my husband, of the life we had built, of the love that felt safe but incomplete. And I thought of Charles, the man whose trust one had begun to rely on, whose presence had become impossible to ignore. The romantic tension between us, once subtle, now crackled like electricity, impossible to deny. I made my choice. I would reveal the truth, but carefully. The story of the Wainwright sisters deserved to be known, their courage acknowledged, and the darkness of their father's control exposed. And I knew that doing so would change my life irrevocably. As I prepared to leave the study, Charles stopped me. "There's one more thing," he said, his eyes darkening. He pulled a final letter from the envelope, older than the others, with the unmistakable Wainwright seal. "This wasn't meant to be found by anyone, ever. It implicates someone closer than you think." I froze. The letter revealed a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. My husband's own mentor, a man I had trusted blindly, had been manipulating events behind the scenes, feeding misinformation about the sisters and guiding my husband's career for reasons no one had suspected. It was a twist so profound it left me breathless, questioning everything I thought I knew. The climax was complete, but the consequences were only beginning. The sisters' secrets were safe in my hands. Charles's trust had deepened, and the hidden betrayal had altered my perspective on loyalty and love. And yet, the story didn't end there. That final revelation hinted at more shadows, more choices, more risks, and a danger that could strike when I least expected it. As I stepped out into the night, clutching the envelopes and letters, the mansion behind me seemed to fade into mist. I realized that even resolved stories have hidden layers, and even moments of triumph carry the seeds of the next twist. The Wainwright heiresses had survived their own storms, and now, so had I. But the final secret would linger, teasing the possibility of danger, romance, and revelation yet to come. The first light of dawn broke over the estate, casting soft golden hues through the tall windows of the Wainwright mansion. I stood in the quiet study, the letters and photographs safely stored, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The story of the Wainwright heiresses had finally been revealed, not to destroy, but to honor their courage and resilience. Each sister had survived her own battles, and now, their secrets were part of a legacy that could teach others about strength, love, and determination. I knew my life would never be exactly the same. My husband, though unaware of the full details, had begun to notice subtle changes in me. The confidence, the knowledge, the quiet awareness of the larger world. And Charles, who had guided me through the labyrinth of secrets, remained a presence I couldn't ignore. Our connection, built on trust and shared danger, had grown into something complicated and profound. I didn't have all the answers, and perhaps I never would, but I understood one thing clearly. Some bonds are formed in the shadows of secrets, and they leave marks that shape you forever. As I walked through the estate one last time, memories of the sisters' courage echoed in my mind. They had used wit, charm, and sheer willpower to navigate the control of a powerful patriarch. Their lessons were subtle but clear. Love is not only about romance. It is about loyalty, bravery, and understanding when to take risks. I smiled, knowing I had learned more about life, love, and resilience than I could have imagined. And yet, even in resolution, the story held its final twist. The mentor who had manipulated events behind the scenes remained at large, a reminder that the past's influence is never truly gone. The path ahead required caution, but it also offered freedom. The freedom to make choices, to trust selectively, and to embrace the complex beauty of relationships shaped by power, desire, and loyalty. I left the mansion with the dawn light warming my face, carrying the weight of the past, but stepping boldly into the future. The Wainwright heiresses' story had ended in triumph, yet it had also opened doors to new possibilities, new lessons, and the understanding that every secret revealed is a chance to grow stronger. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have uncovered the secrets or left them buried? Comment below and share your thoughts. Would you like a sequel to follow the journey of the Wainwright heiresses and the next chapter of their story? 2.